Welcome back to Sliders Podcast. I'm your host Mo, and today we're joined by
Who's Taff? Find it on the pod, aka the champion. But we're not here for me today. We're here for.
Yeah, you're here for me. I'm Dom, I'm 21, and I am an English language student in third year at Newcastle University.
Okay, great. So just to get down to it straight away, why did you pick English language? Because I'm sure, we've all done English language to a degree at GCSE. Most of us dropped it at that point. Like, what made you want to go further and take this onto a university course?
Well, one of the reasons is that I really enjoyed it at A-level. So I took it at A-level as well and just found it really interesting. You know, I found it interesting learning about different theories, about how language is used in different places or by different people. But I think there was also another reason, which I'd call it deeper if I wanted to, but it's because my grandparents were from Italy, so I was always fascinated with the way that they would speak English, because it would always seem so weird to my ear, because every day you're growing up around English people, you're hearing people speaking the exact same way of English. And then to hear people that you're related to speaking English in a different way was just always fascinating to me. And I noticed little things that they do, so like little, the vowels that they'd use or the way they'd say certain words, and it would fascinate me, and I'd obsess for hours on end about the way they'd say certain things. And I think that's probably the thing that sort of got me started interested in language.
Oh, okay. And so after like your A-levels, did you always, when you went into A-levels, did you always plan to take English language to that to university, or was it after your A-levels and having those experiences with your grandparents that you were like, yeah, okay, so this is what I want to do in the future?
I think it was kind of during A-levels that I was, deciding to take it to the next level. Before A-levels, I actually wanted to be a lawyer, so I was going to take law, but I took law as an A-level. And decided, this isn't for me. I just can't do it at the next level. But I was really enjoying English, so I thought, I think that might be the next step for me. And that's where it sort of went from, to be honest. I went to, all the open days that I could that offered English language as a subject, and really liked it up here. So I went to the usual post-offer day, and I liked it then. So it was just a series of things that I went to, and it just sort of confirmed what I thought, and that this was the right course for me.
So you said you went on an open day, right?
Yeah.
Would you say the open day is very accurate? It gives you an accurate description of what the course will be, or is there like some stuff where they're a bit like, that wasn't really like you described it?
I think on the open day they basically show you all the most entertaining aspects of the course, which, to be fair, they're selling a product essentially, aren't they? You know, if you're going to be spending $9,000 a year on this course, you want to have some fun on it, don't you? So they are of course going to show you the more entertaining aspects of the course on that day. But I think it was fairly representative of what we'd end up doing, and I mean, like, the area in which I've done my dissertation, which I'm sure we'll come on to later, was in the same sort of area that they were showing on the open day. So I suppose it had some kind of effect on me.
Okay. And overall, what would you say the demographics are like in your course, male to female, race-wise as well?
It's difficult, because it's been a while since I've sat in a lecture theatre.
Fair enough.
And on Zoom, most people haven't got their cameras on, so But I would say it's mostly female. I'd say maybe 65 to 45. And then race demographics would be a little bit more difficult to put my finger on. I'd say it's a predominantly white course. There's a fair few international students, but I couldn't really put a number on it. But yeah, I'd say it's quite a white course.
Okay. Would you say that the non-white course mates that you do have in any way like contribute to having a more diverse experience? Like, does it help in your understanding and learning of the English language to a deeper level?
I think for sure, because everyone, like, as part of our course, we're we're expected to understand that language is a diverse thing.
Yeah.
And, having a more diverse group of people that are studying the course is only going to contribute to that, because through that you're gonna meet people with different learned experiences of language, and I think that's always helpful for learning different areas. So for example, we did a module on the accents of English. So on that module, we were encouraged to speak to the people on our course and record them to see what their vowels are like, for example. And all the people from different backgrounds, whether that be race or geographic or class, they all had different vowels. So in a way, you're learning more about your course mates by doing the course in some aspects.
Could we do that here, like now, like if you could just analyze the vowels of me and Mo?
I mean, I could, but I'd have to have a book in front of me to make out where you were from.
All right, okay. Because for me, I feel like my accent's sort of confusing. Like I don't know if where would you assume I'm from?
I'd say somewhere down south, to be honest. Like I would say nearish London, but it could be any inner city, to be honest. Any inner city, to be honest.
Nearish London? Are we as a Londoner? Like, can you confirm that? Like, where did you presume I was from when you first met me as well? Because the accent's a lot of like memory, right? Where just you just hear some shit and be like,
honest,
you sound
it's
like.
mostly stereotype. Like you'll just associate different sounds that you hear with different ideas that you have about either a place or the people from that place. So
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't have put you London, Taff. When I first met you, I didn't think you were from London, though. Yeah. Though I wouldn't put that down to your language, though. I'd probably put that more down to your behaviour.
My behaviour?
Yeah. Because when you meet someone, it's not just language you pick up on, but it is definitely one of those things. Like, an accent is a very easy tell of where you're from, most likely, or not from, in that case. But yeah, how would you say you tailored your personal statement to your English language course?
Right. Well, that was a while ago, to be fair.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I talked about most was that sort of personal connection that I had with my grandparents. I think that's something that I played on quite a lot because, it was quite a big decider in me choosing to take the course in the first place. So if I was to offer anyone advice on writing their personal statement, I would say, like, it is a personal statement, so make it personal. Why do you want to do the course? And if you have some kind of attachment to language in general, I'd just say play on that, because it's only going to work in your favour, and it's just going to show what a passionate student that you're going to be on that course.
Okay.
No, that makes sense. And Newcastle University, what was so special or unique about Newcastle in particular that drove you to Newcastle?
I think it was a feeling, to be honest, and then I think this feeling was not just limited to the university as a whole. I think the whole city is something that I connected with. Okay. I couldn't really describe why. It is just a feeling, and I suppose everyone has that feeling. When they go somewhere that they feel like, this could be somewhere that I could go to. This could be somewhere that I could spend 3 years, and I think it's important not to think too much about it. And wherever you have that feeling, whether that be at Newcastle or anywhere else, just recognize that. And I think for me, I always wanted to live in a city. So I come from quite a small city. It's still a city, but I lived on the outskirts of it, and it's not too big. But I always wanted a sort of city life. So
what city?
Stoke-on-Trent, West Midlands.
Oh, okay.
So I think I always gravitated to Newcastle because it is a city campus. And another thing that I wanted to get involved with was, I was pretty passionate about, writing and journalism. And I think that's something that I'm going to do after uni. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to do it as a course because I wasn't, trying to commit myself to anything too early before I really found what I wanted to do. But there were plenty of opportunities here for that. And that's something that I really wanted to do at uni.
And would you say writing and journalism now is your sole focus, for your long-term future after uni, or have you got other avenues open to you as well?
I think I have other avenues open to me, but it's all sort of in the media sphere, so it's not too
Okay.
far removed from journalism, but I would say like news writing is what I really want to do. But I am still open to other sort of media avenues if they open up.
Okay. And are there any particular writers that you aspire to be like, or write in a particular style that you find very interesting?
Yeah, so there's a few. I enjoy reading The Guardian, so I like John Harris. I think he's really good, and he produces a YouTube series as well called Anywhere But Westminster, which is really interesting. So they go around the country like during elections or referendums and stuff like that, and they basically it's like Vox Pops pretty much, but it's got a very political undertone, and they try and gauge the feelings of the country and the political swings that are happening in places that aren't Westminster or places that you wouldn't really consider going to during an election campaign. Sort of the places that are forgotten about, and that really appeals to me.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So you want to have an impact or talk about, or I think the key word really is you want to highlight the experience of people that aren't really talked about a lot in that sense when you're talking about people.
Yeah, I
really-
suppose so. I think that's something that I'm pretty passionate about, and that's something that I've reflected in my course as well. Like when we're talking about language, we're quite often talking about marginalised people whose language is kind of being overlooked, and I think that's something that I took into my writing as well, journalistic wise, anyway.
I have a question.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
random. You might not know the answer, but why is English so popular?
It's an interesting question, and there's quite a lot of answers to it. Basically, one of the reasons is, unfortunately, the British Empire. It had such a wide ranging influence that English, had this major impact around the world during that colonial time, and it's just spread from there really, because England colonized quite strategically, I suppose, and these places have just exploded population wise. But also, I think one of the more undervalued parts of it is the media, and because the UK and America are so culturally relevant, quite a lot of people learn English just through the media that they consume. So whether it be watching Friends on Netflix and you're in India or China,
I know some people that actually learn English through rap songs. Like they just watch rap videos and learn English. That's how some rapper Rich Brian, he's from I think Indonesia somewhere or Philippines, up in America. He watched rap videos and then started learning English and rapped from that, and actually built a career from the English he learned from rap songs, which was
that's actually
quite
that kind of thing is actually happening with speakers of English as a first language as well. So grime has kind of spread the sort of, it's called multicultural London English, like that accent, the grime accent, and that has kind of spread through the kind of people who listen to grime. So even up in my school when I was in high school, like everyone who was listening to grime would pick up like little words or little pronunciations that they would hear in Stormzy songs, for example.
Okay.
So it can spread through that kind of thing, those kind of media mediums.
And other than looking into writers that you yourself enjoy, such as John Harris that you mentioned earlier, has there been anything else or any other research you've done into the job market for your future or no?
Yeah, so quite a lot depends on your political leanings, because obviously newspapers are hugely influential of what happens politically in this country and pretty much everywhere, to be honest. So I think in any kind of media, you've got to find something that suits your moral values, and it's important. I think it's important that you think about those really carefully when you're applying to different places. So for example, I'm looking at trainee schemes now, and I think one of the things that I'm looking at most closely is where the newspaper aligns politically, and whether I would want to be writing the kind of stories that they publish. I think that to me anyway is pretty important.
Is there any newspaper that are there any non-biased newspapers?
It's difficult to answer that question, because there there are some newspapers that consider themselves to be newspapers of record. So what that effectively means is that they can be used as like historical documents. So the Times, for example, considers itself to be a newspaper of record, although it is conservative leaning. So although it sells itself as being very, unbiased and very, historically relevant in terms of like telling the tale of what has happened over history in Britain and around the world, it is telling certain stories from certain angles. So it will always lean centre right. It just always will, whether it considers itself to be unbiased or not.
Okay.
And in terms of studying for your course, do you have any unique study methods yourself?
Not particularly, to be honest. I think it differs on the person, to be honest, and how that person takes in information.
Yeah.
How's it structured? Is it do you get weekly exams, assignments, coursework? Like what type of?
Not really. It's a BA, so I imagine it's pretty similar to any other BA in that you get weekly lectures, seminar activities, and they were I'd say more closely monitored before the pandemic, when you'd actually be going in and someone would be coming around like, oh, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And they'd actually look at what you'd written down to prepare in advance. But now with it being on Zoom, it's a little different. Not in terms of the structure, but in just in terms of like the amount that you prepare. I think lecturers are a lot more forgiving at the minute because it's people are not as driven at the minute for obvious reasons. But yeah, I would say like during normal times, like you are expected to do go to your lectures, do the seminar reading, do the seminar activities, and then assignments are usually like once or twice a term, whether that be an essay or an exam. But yeah, they're not like once a week. So that's not something that if someone had a concern about having assignments all the time, I'd tell them that it's not like that at all.
Yeah. So what would you say is like the average amount of work in terms of like hours do you have to put in each week for your course?
I'd say maybe 3 or 4 hours a day, maybe, if you wanted to get all the seminar work done and all the reading done. In third year, I think it's a little bit different. I think that's probably something that I would highlight to anyone looking to do the course, because obviously in first year and second year there is more of an emphasis on your lectures and your seminars. But I think by the time you're in third year, you become a lot more independent, and you already are pretty independent when you come to uni. But by the time you're in third year, you've got your dissertation, which is going to take up a lot of your time. And the truth is that the lectures and the seminars, they are important, but you could probably do your assignments without doing them. And I go to all my lectures and seminars, but to be honest, you probably could do your assignments without going to your lectures and seminars in third year anyway. Anyway, that's what I've found. Just at Newcastle. That's not a precedent that I'm going to set for everyone.
Fair. All right. And do you think that's because of how independent the assignments are of the seminars? Like you can do your own personal research regardless of the seminar that will help you with your assignment?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I think the specific topics that you're doing for your assignments are fairly independent of the lecture material. The lecture material will probably give you a good basis, but so long as you just read the slides, you're probably all right, because most of the deeper reading is not going to be something that you go into either in the seminar or in the lectures, to be honest. And that's that independent reading you can be doing instead of, at the minute anyway, going to your lecture or your seminar, because you only have so many hours in a day, and I think it's probably more effective to spend those hours in a day on your assignment and looking at the stuff that you maybe wouldn't have time to otherwise, instead of doing the sort of basic work.
Yeah, all right. And if there have been any, what are some of the major obstacles you've faced so far on your course?
To be honest, I don't think there have been many major obstacles on the course. You're always going to get lecturers that mark more kindly than others, but I mean that's something that happens on every course. So if I've encountered that a couple of times, but I think that's not something that's massively unique.
Are you in touch with your lecturers? What would you say the quality of lecturers are like?
I would say that the quality's fairly good. Sometimes there can be a little disconnect in terms of like, like what you're trying to do versus their method of teaching, for example. So in the first lockdown last year, there was a bit of a disconnect between like the group of students on this particular module and the module leader. So the module leader, instead of uploading the normal lectures, like the Zoom recordings that you'd normally get, would do like a video of her doing like a spider diagram, and that was just not the way that the people on that module, including myself, would like to be taught, and it was just a bit difficult to get over that.
Okay. And you say your lecturers are nice because like sometimes lecturers can be a bit, sassy with the replies to feedback or the way they take the feedback. But what would you say just the communication between the lecturers and when that disconnect was met, was that?
I think on the whole it's been pretty good. I haven't. I mean, everyone sees the sort of screenshots on like, Facebook and stuff like that. But fortunately, that's not happened on my course. And when there has been a little bit of a a disconnect, like I say, it's mostly been met fairly well. And I think lecturers are, they are there to help you. At least in my case, I found that, and I think they are fairly accommodating in terms of like, whether you want to have a meeting to discuss something, and their office hours are always good, and they're fairly accommodating, like I say, in terms of any like difficulties that you might have.
And what would you describe as your hardest and easiest assignment so far that you've had?
I would say hardest is probably the dissertation, probably just because it's so long. And because it's so independent as well. Like, you're not getting any lectures on it. It's purely like your own research and work. So I suppose, not that it's difficult. Well, I suppose it is difficult in a way because, like I say, it is long. But there's a certain amount of anxiety involved with the dissertation because, everything that you do is independent. So you're not sure really whether the basis of what you're reading or what you're typing is actually any good. And I think, if you were someone that had a lot of anxieties, that could be pretty tough. But yeah, I think it's very rewarding to do one as well. And then in terms of easiest assignments, like there are some assignments that are really easy, like especially like in a group presentation, if you get a good group. But equally, a group presentation can go very wrong very quickly
left,
if you
fam.
get a bad. If you get a bad group, definitely it can go pretty bad. But I would say on the whole, like the level of difficulty on the assignments has been pretty level. Like on most modules, you'll get like a 2,500 to 3,000 word essay, and that's pretty standard.
Have you ever had a bad group activity?
Well, in uni?
Yeah,
of course. But then you really just have to, you can communicate with your team. And if no one's like, this usually happens like first year. Yeah, if no one wants to pick up the work, then if you don't want to let your grades slip, you just have to pick up the work for the rest of the team.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, I've had to do that in the past.
How did that group assignment go? Like, what is an English language group assignment like?
True.
Well, I'll give you an example of one of the better ones because that's the one most recent in my memory. So we did a module. Well, I'm doing a module at the minute called Language and Aging, where you look at the way that older people use language, because traditionally in like linguistic research, older people aren't really looked at because they're sort of determined as not interesting, because it's assumed that when you get to an age of like, let's say 65 plus, that your variation as a person is just going to stop, and you're not expected to change the way you talk or the words that you pick up and stuff like that. So one of the assignments that I had for that module was to explain what linguistic variation was to older people, just to inform them, like, in terms of what research goes into it. so that was pretty good, and I had, I was with someone that I knew, so that group assignment was easier. And I think one of the good things about that one as well was that you were allowed to present it in whatever format suited you most. So a lot of people did like slideshows. Some people, I did a podcast, for example, and I found that pretty good. And I think that kind of flexibility was good in a group assignment, because if you're gonna do a group assignment, it is quite difficult to get lots of people on the same page behind the same assignment brief. So I think putting that flexibility in there was pretty good.
Cool.
So if we could go more into your dissertation, what specifically are you doing? And if you could briefly explain it for those of us that really have no understanding of linguistics.
Yeah, sure. So my dissertation is it's a comparative study on language policy, on like African languages in South Africa and Irish in the Republic of Ireland and the UK.
Yep.
So language policy basically is where a government sets out different legislation to promote the use of a language. And they can do this for a variety of reasons. So, for example, in Ireland, one of the reasons that they did it was because English was so dominant in culture. And, when Ireland became an independent nation again, I think it was 1922, when the Irish Home Rule Bill was introduced, the Irish government felt that one of the keys to establishing themselves as an independent country again was to reintroduce their language in society.
Yeah.
So it can be for like cultural reasons that they do it. And I think that was very much the case in South Africa as well. So in South Africa, I don't know if people know, it's probably worth looking up, to be honest, because I can't, explaining this would take ages, but
yeah,
they had a system called apartheid, which lasted until the sort of mid-90s. And when Nelson Mandela's party, the African National Congress, got into power, one of the key things for them in establishing their new nation was to make sure that the African languages, which were previously marginalised under apartheid, were promoted, and that they weren't marginalised anymore, and that the barriers that were in place for those people who spoke those languages and were of that ethnicity were removed from society, so that those languages could become, more useful effectively in society where they weren't previously allowed to be.
And in studying and writing your dissertation for the past couple of months now, what would you say is the most eye-opening thing that you've learned or discovered since then?
There's been quite a few things, to be honest. I think they've mostly been to do with what happened in South Africa in terms of apartheid, and how the people of these ethnicities and who spoke these languages were just treated so awfully, and that's pretty eye-opening. So I think, that's one of the major things, and the way that that's been approached in the modern era has been so ineffective. So, for example, one of the things that they tried to do in the modern era to promote the use of the African languages was to implement them in government, and that was one of the first things that they tried to do. So before 1994, the only languages that were used in the South African Parliament were Afrikaans, which is like a South African version of Dutch, and English. And then, when the Constitution came in, they implemented 11 official languages, including those two. So you can imagine that going from only using 2 languages in Parliament to using 11 was a pretty difficult process, and they, to this day, have not found a good way of doing it. Since the mid-90s, and that's a problem in itself, in terms of like, some of the government departments that have been tasked with implementing these African languages into their day-to-day sort of working have been just so ineffective and unwilling to do anything about it, because they just don't recognise the importance of it to people.
I just clocked, in a way, it's sort of useful to have like a dominant language in the world.
Well, across the entire world.
Yeah, across the entire world. Like it's very useful, because communication between countries, getting stuff done, transportation, like
Yeah.
as
Thought about that
as
before.
wild as it is how the language became dominant, overall, like the world has benefited greatly from just being able to communicate with each other. Like even the whole Afrikaans and English thing, like I guarantee they might implement those 11 languages, but there is one language that they probably use that makes it easy for everyone in the room to understand what's going on. And maybe you might need to translate to one person on the side, but to get your point across as quickly and as efficiently to as many people as possible, it just makes sense.
It's very convenient, and one of the reasons that they haven't managed to do it is because English is just so convenient. That's one of the reasons they actually used, was that like we just can't see the point of implementing all these languages when English is so convenient. But actually, when you think about it, yeah, it's convenient, but it ostracizes a lot of people who, for economic reasons or for educational reasons, for example, where education isn't as good in that area. Are just a lot of people aren't able to use English at the level that's required for a lot of things. And I've read a lot of studies in terms of some of the South African children trying to learn English and doing tests in English and stuff like that, and the quality of education is really poor, and quite often. So, for example, like, did you guys learn a foreign language at school?
Yeah.
Yes,
French and Spanish.
French and German.
So did you start learning that once you're in high school? Yeah.
Yeah, I started in high school. Year 9? No, actually no, it was in the earlier years.
So that's very similar to these kids in South Africa. So they will learn like their home language first, whether that be like, I don't know, Zulu or Xhosa or something like that, until they're like, let's say year 8 or year 9.
Yeah.
And then they'll learn English as like a separate subject, like you would have learned French, for example. And then from year 9 onwards, all the teaching, apart from their like home language, so Zulu, for example, is in English. So imagine like if you were speaking English up until year 8 or year 9, and then you switched to French, and only your English lessons were in English. Could you imagine like the effect that would have on your education?
That fucks everything.
Honestly,
Yeah.
it
Difficulty
That's
as well.
test results gone down the toilet. That fucks everything.
That's
fam.
why like the average results for these kids was like 25 to 30%. Like 35 was like the highest in one of the studies that I looked at. And it gets to the point where their limited English is actually better than their home language, because they've only learnt their home language up until a certain age. And obviously, like, by the time you're like, I don't know.
So now you have human beings that aren't proficient in any language.
Yeah, well, they can speak their home language because they've spoken it from birth, but like they're not literate in it now.
No, damn.
Wow. Oh, you would think that. Well, one part of me would think that learning all my other subjects in French, for example, would mean that my French would definitely get better because I'm using it in a lot of aspects of my life.
It can only get better to a point, though, can't it?
Yeah.
But then
exactly.
now you're doing science, you're doing physics and chemistry in French. So now you're learning. You've barely like grasped the language in terms of like grammar, I assume, or like
Exactly.
And then you're
how
going
to
home and
speak it
speaking
properly.
English again.
Exactly. So I'm not even reinforcing it in that sense.
Yeah, so you just
Yeah.
come in and you're trying to learn French while also learning physics at the same time. So you're learning two different things.
Yeah.
So while you're trying to wrap your way around of understanding an atom is da 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 da, you need to understand what that says. Then you need to understand what an atom is.
Yeah.
So it's actually, it makes sense. That's so done.
Imagine
It's
having to
like
pull out,
multi-layered learning all at the same time. Yeah.
It's. I think South Africa is one of the economy-wise. It's one of the places with the biggest wealth gap. I think.
Yeah. And I think that is true in the sort of language gap as well. So the way it's worked is, so obviously beforehand, during apartheid, again, look this up, people, was that the Afrikaans speaking people were at the top for a good 50 years, and one of the communities that they ostracized the most was the black community that spoke English, because they were seen as the most dangerous in terms of like revolting against the Afrikaners, because they feared that if the black people who spoke English revolted, then everyone of that ethnicity would just rally behind English and revolt against the Afrikaners. So it has turned out in the end that these black people who spoke English are now at the top of society, and everyone who doesn't speak English is just struggling to keep up because that's now become the dominant language. So I think there is a real linguistic divide as well as economic as well, and what language you speak in that environment anyway can lead to certain economic benefits or deficiencies.
Yeah, you'd often find in South Africa, like people that might speak Xhosa or Zulu, they will understand Afrikaans just because, or like they'll just know enough to get by. It's like if Spain, England, and France were just in one group. You're proficient in French, but then you need to know the other two just to get by. Because I might go to a shop and you only speak French, or I might go to the taxi and he only speaks English, and so those are the type of issues South Africans face on a daily, where they just you don't know what language you're going to expect when you hear someone. Whereas here, you're guaranteed someone's going to speak English versus...
Yeah, it's incredibly linguistically diverse. And, I suppose in that way, it's kind of different to Ireland because, there've been arguments, particularly in Northern Ireland, that Irish shouldn't actually be an official language because, and this is something that I think the First Minister of Northern Ireland said a couple of years ago. And, this could have been for political reasons as well, because there's a whole sort of political debate behind the Irish language, depending on what side of, unionist or nationalist you are.
Yeah.
But she argued that Irish shouldn't be an official language because there's actually more native speakers of Polish in Northern Ireland than there are Irish speakers.
Oh, damn. How'd they get there?
Just, immigration.
Yeah.
Oh.
Wow.
Damn.
Are there any solutions, more in reference to the problem in South Africa, to the linguistic divide, or is it just like you've managed and linguists, I would say linguists have highlighted a problem that definitely exists, perpetrates different areas of society, and is definitely a problem economically, educationally, all of these sorts.
The knock-on effects are drastic.
The knock-on effects, exactly.
Test results, like...
Bro, I can only imagine.
That's an entire cohort of people just fucked. Like, do those students even get to go to uni?
I can't say I've looked into
Or
it that
college,
far because I looked at those test results and just thought, right, that's...
Yeah.
Like, are there any solutions that anyone's thought of, or that are hopefully in practice, maybe, or in the workings?
There are solutions, yes, but again, it's so wrong at the minute where it would take a lot of turning around.
Yeah.
So, for example, their whole educational system in terms of how they expect kids to learn language is just, from a linguistic point of view, pretty wrong. So they're expecting kids to learn in this system called additive bilingualism, which is basically what I highlighted earlier in terms of like you learn the other language in that other language and then everything else in your current language. And that's not really a very beneficial way to become bilingual. But they've persisted with it for 20, 25 years now.
That's enough to have a 25-year-old to grow up in that system. So how has that group of people that grew up in those 25 years turned out, if you've seen that far?
Not very well in terms of bilingualism, no. But it's just getting various parts of government to take it seriously. So what I highlighted earlier as well in terms of the government departments. So there's a language board in South Africa, and they held like a sort of meeting, and they established that most of the departments of government actually aren't doing anything about like the aims that were established in the constitution or any of the language acts that have been passed.
Yeah.
So I think part of it is just getting people to take it seriously. And these issues are so entrenched in South African society that if you're not setting an example at the top in terms of the way that your government's gonna act in terms of like say that you needed to speak to the Department of Health about something, like say you had a complaint about the way something is in a hospital, but they don't have anyone that speaks Zulu, for example. if you're not setting that example at the top in terms of your government, your education, your media, it's just not going to have any effect on society.
I feel like this topic is so interesting. We might like bring you back again to just further discuss this. But what's the next phase of questioning, Mo?
Yeah. So regarding stress, has your course affected your mental health in any way, and if so, how did you handle it?
I think every course in some respect affects your mental health. I think, you know, just the pressure of having having deadlines is quite stressful. But I think there's various avenues that you can explore to sort of handle that, whether that be through like counselling or, you know, there's PEC forms as well, for example, which always come in useful. So yeah, I think it has in terms of like, you know, stress and anxiety, but I think there are various ways that you can handle that.
Okay. And what would you say? What advice would you have for any students that are thinking of applying to the English language course or to Newcastle University in particular?
I'll do one of each. So for someone applying to Newcastle, a piece of advice that I would have is, you know, keep an open mind in terms of what you're expecting from the uni, because I feel like a lot of people have various expectations of uni, and they often have this kind of plan worked out, or at least I did, in terms of what I was going to do. You know, the kind of people that I was going to socialise with, for example, the kind of places that I was going to go for a drink.
That's detail.
No,
that's a lot of detail.
I thought in detail about it. But yeah, I would just say keep an open mind, and you know, particularly I think it's important in this year coming up to just get involved with stuff, especially if you've been a fresher this year and you haven't quite had the uni experience. Just get involved as much as you can, because you know, getting involved with societies and, you know, in my case, student media has been really core to my uni experience, and I think it's a really good way to meet people.
Okay. And what would you say is a life lesson that you've learned at uni?
I've learned so many. It'd be tough to condense it down into one. I would say probably the most important one was just to trust myself. And I think, you know, particularly when you've got to this stage, there's quite a lot of, or at least in my case, there was a lot of anxiety around like doing A-levels, like, oh, would I be good enough to get into this place or get into that place? And I think that's probably a feeling that a lot of people share. But yeah, just trust yourself. Trust that you are actually good enough to be here, wherever you are. And, you know, once you do trust yourself in that respect, like, I think your results are really going to show, because, you know, once you're confident in, like, your ability, then your abilities are just going to shine.
And it's a little segment that we like to call wins, losses, and lessons. What would you say are the wins, lessons, and lessons of uni so far?
Wow. Win, getting involved with lots of things. Loss, I should have had more water before this podcast. That's the loss. Lesson, value your time. I think that's something really important, especially in a pandemic year. Just value your time. Like, every time that you're on a night out, or every time that you're out out for a drink with your friends, every time that you're, you know, in the library till 1 a.m, just value that experience in whatever way you can.
Yeah. Lovely.
That's beautiful.
And overall, would you say that university is or has been a scam for the money you pay for it? No.
Definitely not. In terms of the experience I got, like, definitely not. Maybe in terms of, like, value for money this year, in terms of, like, teaching, but the overall experience, like, it's priceless to me. In terms of, like, the friends that I've made, the things that I've learned, what I found out about myself as well.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
This has been Sliders Podcast. I've been your host, Mo. We've been joined today by...
Who's Tav? Today we found out about Dom.
And me, Dom. You can find me on Instagram at photos of Dom Lee. You could also get me a drink of water virtually if you want.
His Insta will be in the description below. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at SlidersPod and also on TikTok.
Yep.
So make sure to subscribe down below, like, comment, share with your family and friends.
The GoFundMe is active. Sliders Miami 2022 coming for you.
Okay, sliding out.